Okay, so we are studying Pirqe Abot. We're in chapter 2, Halacha Yod Dalet. So in this book, it's on page, let me see. Let's see where it is. Halacha Yod Dalet. Actually, well, it's a different, I'm following Hanabam, but okay, it's on page 20. Here, and you'll see the Tet Zayin on the bottom of the page. So page 20, where the Tet Zayin is. And we're going forward in terms of the progress of the Hachamim in time, right? And we see that Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, who was during the destruction of the Bayit Sheni, he had 5 Talmidim. And now we are in the second Talmid. On Shabbat, we studied the wisdom and the lessons of Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus. So that was on Shabbat. Now we are studying about the next Talmid, Talmid number 2 of 5, and that's Rabbi Yehoshua. So this is Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hananiah. So that's what we're going to be studying tonight. And it's interesting because, you know, these lessons, they were recorded thousands of years ago, right? And yet, as you're going to see, they are so relevant for us today. And it's really remarkable how relevant they are to our lives today. So let's just get into it and you'll see what I'm talking about. Rabbi Yehoshua Omer, Ayin Hara, a person who has an evil, and actually the correct Girsah is Ayin Ra'ah. So I'm gonna read the correct Girsah. It's Ayin Ra'ah. If a person has an evil eye, literally Ayin Ra'ah means it's referring not to the person, it's referring to the actual eye, okay? Ayin Ra'ah, a person has an evil eye. The Yeser Hara, and a person has an evil inclination, right? Yeser Hara, we're going to explain what that is soon. And finally, V'sinata B'riyot, and if a person has hatred towards his fellow man, okay? Those are 3 traits: evil eye, evil spirit, and hatred towards others. Mosi'in et ha'adam min ha'olam. These 3 things have the following result. The person will be taken out of life prior to his time, meaning he will lose his world. He will lose this world early, right? So we all want to live our lives to its fullest potential, right? But there are certain things we can do to shorten our lives. So we always think about physical things to shorten our lives. So people say, oh, well, you know, if I smoke cigarettes, it's not a good idea because if I smoke cigarettes, I'm definitely going to be shortening my life. So, okay, so you don't smoke cigarettes. I don't want to have, you know, bad cholesterol in my, you know, clogging up my arteries. You don't want to do that. So you don't do that. Okay. So there's all these physical things. But the purpose of the Yehoshua is to say, well, actually, there are also spiritual things that one can do, which would result in the shortening of one's life. They take you out, literally, they take you out of this world. Okay, so you lose this world, which of course is a pity.
Sorry.
Yeah, please.
So is it all 3 that he's looking to teach, or if you have any of these 3, it's shortening your life?
Yeah, I think this is a very good question. I think these 3 things are interrelated. And part of what I want to do in this class is show the relationship between these 3 things. So it's not that there's 3 separate things, but these 3 things together, they describe a particular psychological complex. And it's a psychological complex that many people have, right?
Because
and
if
often,
you have an evil spirit, you probably have hatred toward people.
Right. And we'll see that it's actually it's even deeper than that. But the point is that psychological complexes rarely manifest themselves in one particular single trait, but rather a psychological complex usually manifests itself in various manners and in various irrational outbursts. So this is a complex. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hananiah is talking about a particular psychological predisposition, a particular illness. I refer to it as an illness, although people say it's not an illness. It's just bad character. But in the Torah, we consider bad character itself to be an illness, and that's important to understand. So that's why I do refer to these things as an illness. Last question.
I'm assuming that it's based on the actions he's gonna take as a result of having these features, right? And if he has these features, but he doesn't, he's able to.
Wait, so
overcome them or-
let's study. Let's see what this is about, and then based on that, we will be able to analyze it more correctly. Let's start with Ayn Ra. We said we're talking about an evil eye, not a person, not the person who has the eye. If it was a person who has the eye, it would be like the Girsah here. Here it says Ayn Hara. But if you look at the Girsah of Harambam, it doesn't say Ayn Hara. Ayn Hara means the eye of an evil person. And that's what this is saying. The correct Girsah is Ayn Ra'ah, that the eye itself is an evil eye. So how can an eye be a bad eye? That's interesting. So think about this for a moment. So you know that everybody here, thank God, Baruch Hashem, with God's grace, we all see color. We all see. And in addition to being able to see, we see color. So what is color? Color is a type of visible light. And you know, the light is actually an electromagnetic wavelength, right? So there's electromagnetic wavelengths in the universe. You can have electromagnetic wavelengths that are sufficient. If the wavelength is sufficiently long, it would come out, for example, as radio. So the radio that we hear on our car radio, that's a particular wavelength. If you get to the very, very short end of the spectrum, you get X-rays. X-rays is another type of electromagnetic wavelength, although you don't see it. But then there's electromagnetic wavelengths which the eye can see, right? So those are visible wavelengths, meaning the human eye can see the particular colors that we recognize as visible light, and that has to do a lot with the nature, not just of the light that we're seeing. And I said it's a particular wavelength that we can see. We can't see wavelengths that are too short. We can't see wavelengths that are too long, right? So we see the visible spectrum of the wavelength. Now, by the way, what is light? So for example, you see here, there's blue, right? So what is this blue color here? You see it? So the way it works is, so light doesn't hold a physical shape. It keeps traveling and it's absorbed by objects. So for example, if you see that this object is blue, what this really means is that this object is absorbing the light and is absorbing all the wavelengths except for the blue wavelength. And that wavelength is being reflected back and your eye sees that wavelength. So when you see something blue, it actually means it's anything but blue. If you caught that, or let's say there's a red color, red color item, right? There's a red book over there. So that means that the substance from which that book is made, it absorbs all of the wavelengths of the light, except for the red, which it emits. And then your eye sees obviously the wavelength that is being emitted by that object, and your eye captures it. So yeah, exactly. So when someone sees something that's red, it means the object has been absorbed. The object has absorbed every other wavelength but the red wavelength, and so on. When something is white, by the way, what is white? If you see something as white, it means that all of the wavelengths were absorbed. Now, when something is black, what does it mean? It means that none of the wavelengths were absorbed. All of the wavelengths were reflected, right? So now what happens to the eye? So once the radiation is reflected and it comes into vision, it's funneled through the photoreceptors in the retina of the eye. So the retina has certain photoreceptors, cones and rods. And as the photoreceptors process this light, right, they categorize how much of each type is present in the radiation. So we recognize that as colors, right? So we form the colors in our mind, the brain forms the colors and we recognize colors. And that's because we have this incredible complexity in the human eye, incredible complexity. The eye is an incredibly complex machine, right? But there are people, and not surprisingly, machines are sometimes defective. So there are people who have a particular defect in the eye. And they see things as in very grayish. They're colorblind, right? So they see things in a dull fashion. For them, the world is dull, right? So there's different types of eyes. For example, honeybees, by the way, they don't see red, but they see ultraviolet. We don't see ultraviolet, right? So, but let's go back to colorblind people, because that's interesting. So if you're a colorblind person, you're looking at the world, your eyes are defective. So what do you see? You see a very dull, grayish world. You don't see the world in its full beauty. So the ability to perceive beauty requires that you have a very well fine-tuned machine called the human eye. And if that human eye isn't fine-tuned, it will not see the colors. Okay? So you can have a bad eye, you can have a defective eye. Let's think about that for a second. So what is a person who has ayin ra'ah? It's obviously not talking about colorblind people. It's talking about people who view the world through a particular prism. So here's the thing. From the perspective of the Torah, the world that God created is quite beautiful and quite magnificent, and God himself loves the world that he created. That's why after the creations, Hashem says, Hashem looks at the creations, and this is just wonderful. Now Hashem is saying it's wonderful, so he must really mean it. But not everybody views the world in this manner, because as we get older, we develop certain defects in our spiritual eyes, and we view the world in a very dark fashion. Now, there is a particular thing that prevents us from enjoying the full array of colors in our lives. So we all have these colors, and Hashem ensures that we have beauty in our lives, but we don't perceive the colors. And what is it that prevents us from perceiving colors? I'm not talking about the human eye, I'm talking about the spiritual eye, right? And the answer is jealousy. Right? When a person is jealous of his friend, or when a person is envious of his friend, and he's always looking at what he has, and then he says, why don't I have that? Why does he get that and I don't get that? So he becomes very jealous and envious. So that's a sickness. That's a very particular sickness. Now, if you look at the Jewish people in the desert, one of the things that Hashem wanted to do to the Jewish people in the desert, and we're not going to be reading about it, because this Parashat Baalot Echad begins that, he wanted to show the people that you can be in the desert, you can be in a place where there is no civilization, where there are no buildings, and yet you can perceive the world as a very beautiful place. And when the Jewish people failed to perceive what God was doing for them as beautiful, all right, they begin to complain. Hashem got very particular about that, and he doesn't tolerate that because he doesn't want people to fail to see the beauty in what he's doing to them. So beauty is not just the world, but it's the situations that God gives us. God gives us a lot of beautiful things in our life. And when we fail to recognize what God gave us and we complain, and we're bitter and envious, so then God gets upset and he says, you know what? Okay, you're complaining? Next. I was going to do a lot of good stuff, but you complained so much. This is what happened to the Jewish people in the desert. They were complaining. And what did God tell the Jewish people? Enough of this. You complain, no problem. I'm not going to take you to Israel. I have this amazing, amazing thing waiting for you, but you're not worth it, because here's a trick. If you complain in the desert, you would also complain in Israel. You see that? People who complain, people who put on those prisms where they're envious, where they're jealous, where they're bitter about their lot and jealous about somebody else, those people will never be happy. And there's a pasuk in the Torah, and I'm going to read to you the pasuk. And this pasuk is the last of the 10 commandments. Meaning, this is foundational. This isn't like, some detailed law like Lo tilbash atnez semur v'shtim yahdam that appears in a few particular places in the Chumash. Okay, it's a very particular law. Of course, we take every letter in the Torah as holy. I'm not chas v'shalom in any way suggesting that because it's a particular law, you shouldn't take it seriously. But not every law is foundational. What I'm about to read to you now is foundational. It is the last of the 10 commandments. Okay, so this is one of the 10 pillars of the Torah. Lo tahmod bet re'echa. Do not look at the house of your fellow with envy, with desire. You want that house. Don't do that. Lo tahmod eshet recha. Do not look at your fellow, at the wife of your friend or at the wife of your fellow with envy. Don't do that. His wife is for him. His house is for him. God is giving you other things, whatever it is that God is giving you, right? The adot, don't look at his servant, amato, his female servant, shoro, hamoro, in modern terminology, instead of an ox and a donkey, I would say a Hummer and a car, and a sports car, right? Don't look at those things and say, why does he have it? I want that. No, because it belongs to him. God gave it to him. God planned the universe. God has a plan for you. He has a plan. God has a plan for everybody. There's nobody in the world for whom God doesn't have a plan. So be happy with what God gave you. Cultivate what God gave you. Don't think about what God gave him. Think about what God can give you. Now, I want to elaborate on this a little bit. I also don't want people to misunderstand this, because this is an often misunderstood law. One of the greatest commentaries on the Chumash is Rabbi Avraham ben Arabah, the son of Maimonides. He wrote some amazing books. Some of them we have, some of them we don't have. And he analyzes this particular prohibition. And he points out that this prohibition is specifically targeting a person who looks at his friends or neighbors' property and he wants those specific things for himself. Okay? I want to be clear. It is permissible and there's nothing wrong for a person to build up his own assets and to build up his own properties. That's allowed. That's not prohibited. So, for example, let's say you go to your friend's house and he has a beautiful house. You can say, I want to build a beautiful house for myself. Of course. There's nothing wrong with that. Because you're not thinking about your friend's house, you're thinking about your house. So if your friend has a beautiful house, and you say, you know what, I want to have a house like this. I want to build a house like this for myself. I want to design it. I want it to be over there. I'm going to build a house. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. That's fine. Because you're not looking at your friend's house. You're not saying, I want to take his house. You understand it's a fine distinction. There's nothing wrong with wanting good for yourself. What's wrong is being jealous of the good or desiring the good that was given to somebody else. Don't ever desire what God gave to somebody else, right? Everybody has challenges in life. Everybody has successes, right? Don't look at somebody else's successes because you don't know what that person's challenges are, right? It sometimes happens that somebody desires somebody else's successes and God says, you know what? Boom. I'll show you what it's like to be that person. Right? Not a fun thing. Not a fun thing at all, right? So and you know what? I want to say that this is actually really relevant to the following distinction between capitalism on the one hand and communism, socialism on the other hand. Because communists were the communists, I'm talking about in Russia, but it doesn't have to only be in Russia, of course, but the communists were very, very jealous people. One of the driving forces of communism, and one of the reasons that communism was so appealing to the masses in Russia was because it leveraged this human sickness that says, if he's succeeding, I must hate him. Because I'm not succeeding like him. I don't have what he has. So when Stalin told the masses to go massacre the kulaks, they went to the Russian countryside, and particularly in the Ukraine, and they began to take over the farms, and they killed the owners, and they literally, I think they exiled tens of millions of dollars. They're literally just, taking away property from people, right? That's a sickness. That's exactly what the Torah is talking about. They literally went into people's houses, took their houses. They literally went to people, they killed them, or they exiled them, or they threw them to the, to the fields. It was it's a horrible stand in human history. So this idea of communism and socialism, which to a certain extent is beginning to, I see it developing in a certain way in the United States, where they have this kind of like class warfare, where they're trying to tell people to hate each other, right? I see it. I see the way the politicians are doing it here. They're following that particular methodology, which says, well, if you're not as rich as him, there's something wrong with that person. So that's a socialist communist approach, which is based upon lo tahmod. In contrast, the approach of capitalism is everybody has a right to excel. You're jealous of your friend because he succeeded? Well, here's a news flash. How about you work hard, make some money, and get what your friend, because your friend has his stuff because he worked hard and he made some money. So you can do the same thing, right? That's the idea of capitalism. Capitalism is the idea of individuality, individualism. Everybody has a right to go out. So instead of being obsessed with the other person and hating the other person, how about you become obsessed with yourself and with loving yourself, right? So that's a really important point that the Torah, in this case, the Torah shares this, I think, with the capitalistic system. And I'm not here to preach about America and all that. That's, everybody can vote for whoever they want to vote. I'm just trying to explain the contemporary value of this particular statement by Rabbi Yoshua, right? So, and it's a sickness. So people always talk about the wealthy. Why do the wealthy have so much money? I guess they have so much money because they worked really hard and they built businesses and they made good decisions. And they knew what to do and when to do it. And and if you're jealous of them, how about you make some good decisions in your life and do something good? And rather than whine about how they have so much money, you should be thinking about what you can do to make so much money. So that's the evil eye. Ayn ra'ah means looking at the outside world with this eye that's defective. Everything looks dark, everything looks black, and then you become embittered about the other rather than trying to help yourself. That's the first part of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hananiah, Ayn Ra'ah. Any questions at this point before I go to the next part? Yes, sir. Go.
Isn't that similar to what happened in Poland in the Holocaust, when Jews would have dress for Shabbat and have on things in.
Right. So unless, I understand the question. Let me answer it. I'm less familiar with what happened. I think that's an oversimplification. I don't know because I haven't studied the psychology of the Holocaust. I know the German was Hitler was a sick person, and he had particular pathologies. I know that the German people then were very sick, and they had particular pathologies. It would be very simplistic to reduce it to that, and that's why I brought the example of the communists killing the kulaks, or the owners of the kulaks rather, than the example of Nazism. So I don't want to get into that. There's more to say about that, but not in the context of this Mishnah. Yes, sir.
When studying Baba Basra.
Yeah. Yes.
And we talk about Rabbi Akiva selling a house with an iron tove.
Yeah.
With an iron tove.
Yeah.
And some, the Chachamim say, with an iron rod.
Right.
Something like that. You can sell the well, but you can't sell the field. If you
Right.
sell the field, you don't have access to the well.
Right.
Is that?
Possibly, but we would have to study the Sukkah carefully and see what exactly Rabbi Akiva was talking about. Let's go now to the second point of Rabbi Yoshua ben Hananiah's statement. So we said Ayn Ra'ah. Ayn Ra'ah has a Siamese twin. Okay, Ayn Ra'ah has a Siamese twin that's connected to it, and the name of the Siamese twin is Yeser Hara. So when you have a person with Ayn Ra'ah who sees the world with that defective eye, where he's always envious of other people and jealous, right? That person also has a Yeser Hara. He has an evil instinct, and I want to show you why I say that it's a Siamese twin. Okay, so the Torah says you can't eat non-kosher food. And you say, well, the Torah is denying me the right to eat this non-kosher food. So it's a kind of a tragedy, because I'm not going to be enjoying that. Well, that's not entirely true, because the Torah allows you to eat a lot of delicious foods, right? In other words, the Torah does allow you to eat delicious steak and delicious chicken and all these delicious foods. The Torah is not denying you anything that your body naturally desires and anything that your body naturally wants. It's just saying you can't have that, but instead of that, well, you can have this. The Torah, for example, the Torah says you're not allowed to be with that particular person. You can't be with that person. But it's not telling you can't be with all people. Actually, you have a huge selection to choose from, right? So why would a person then need to eat non-kosher food, for example? Let's use that as an example. There's a very interesting Gemara where the wife of Rav Nachman was complaining, why don't we get to eat basar b'halab? If the Torah lets us eat everything, following up on what I just said. So if the Torah lets us eat whatever we want to eat, why can't we have meat and milk? He said, actually, there is a case where you can have meat and milk. If you have the breast, the udder of an animal, the udder of an animal actually has milk inside, and you cook it. You have to obviously prepare it properly, right? You have to know how to prepare it, but there's a way to prepare it. And if you have that udder, it's the taste of meat and milk. So even things that the Torah prohibited, you have that. She said, what about pig meat? You can't have pig meat. So her husband answered her, well, there's a particular fish. I think it's called shushpita. I forget the exact name of the Gemara. And he says the brain of that fish has the exact same taste as pig meat. The point of that Gemara is to say that God is allowing us to enjoy the maximum physical enjoyment that we can have. It's just saying, don't do that. But there's so much that you can do that there's almost no end, right? So in that case, what's so exciting about having a non-kosher steak? Why would a person want to have a non-kosher steak? You understand the question? Yeah, there's a lot of married men who do things they're not supposed to do, right? Why is that necessary? I mean, there's a lot of effort in doing things you're not supposed to do. There's a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of energy to get that. So why not just fix your own relationship? Have a healthy relationship. All that effort that you put into that, illicit relationship, you can put into really fixing things, whatever they are, or not, or divorcing and find somebody else. But the point is, why is there a need to eat non-kosher food? You understand my question? And here you see that Yeser Hara, that need to eat non-kosher food, is related to Ayin Hara. What does Ayin Hara say? What I have is no good. And because what I have is no good, I need my neighbor's house, I need my neighbor's farm, I'm jealous of the rich, they should be taxed more, I should be able to stay home and get more Biden checks so I can watch porn on TV while I eat popcorn all day, right? I mean, that's what it's about, right? So if I can stay home and eat popcorn all day, that's awesome. That's a great, meaningful life. What? Right. Right. So that sickness, which says, rather than help myself, let me always focus on that which is not mine. Let me focus on the other thing which I have no access to. That's what I want. It's exactly like the Yetzer Hara. That's exactly what the Yetzer Hara tells you. It's the exact same pathology manifesting itself in a different manner, right? The Yetzer Hara says, no, your wife is not good. Go to another one. Why is that, right? Oh no, this food is not good. I remember I once had a conversation with an Israeli who was telling me about some non-kosher steak, and the basic premise of the discussion was that no, you don't understand. Non-kosher steak is so delicious. And I said, why is that? I mean, it's a cow. Is it a cow or something else? Like, is it a horse? No, it's not a horse. So is it a cow? Yeah, it's cow meat. I said, well, what is it? It's like T-bones. Like, well, what? Yeah, T-bones. So why would it be more tasty? Because you didn't do shechita on the animal. So if I took a gun and blew the animal's brains out, the meat is going to be really delicious. But if I did shechita, the meat is not going to taste good. And he really believed this. And a lot of people really believe that non-kosher food cannot be as tasty. And by the way, a lot of non-kosher food is not tasty. That's not because there's something wrong with the non-kosher food. It's people preparing the food. But you can also have kosher food that's incredibly tasty and is as tasty as any other food, right? Or any other steak. So I hear that a lot. And I just find it amusing. I personally find it amusing. And I think it's the same obsession. What's mine? No, it's not good. I have to look at something else that's not mine. You see? Yes, Gore.
So what is the difference between person with Yetzer Hara who eat kosher food or eat not kosher?
Everybody has Yetzer Hara.
So who has more?
Right. Yeah. No, wait. Everybody has a yes. Right. Everybody has a Yetzer Hara. Right. In other words, even the most pious person in the world has a Yetzer Hara. There's no such thing. Let me answer your question. There's no such thing as a person who doesn't have a Yetzer Hara. The difference between people, or let's say between a Sadiq and a Rasha, is a Sadiq makes a decision to control his impulses. Everybody has a Yetzer Hara, right? Now, when you go to outside in public, right, a psychologist will tell you you have certain impulses, but you know how to control your impulses because you're in public and you don't want to break social conventions. So you're not going to do some things in public because it would be socially unacceptable, right? But you have the Yetzer Hara to do it, but you control yourself. So the Sadiq is a person who controls himself all the time, not just when he's in public, where the fear of society is upon him, because everybody recognizes the fear of society and everybody recognizes the humiliation that comes with public sin, okay? But the Sadiq is a person who also recognizes the fear of God, and that, therefore, when he's alone, he doesn't make an avirah. So everybody has a Yetzer Hara. The question is whether you choose to act properly or choose to, follow it. But the point is that you see the relationship between the Ayin Hara and the Yetzer Hara. You see that there's a very strong relationship there between the two things. And that's why I said they're bound together at the hips as Siamese twins are. Did I answer your question? Yeah, do you have it? Because you look a little. Okay, think about it. If you have a follow-up question, let me know. The pasuk says, "En sadiq ba'aris asher ya'aseh rak tov velo yacheta." There is no such thing as a person who has never done a sin. Everybody has a Yetzer Hara, right? It's just a question of whether you decide to, take responsibility, build yourself up, or not. And many people choose not. Okay. Any other questions before we go to the third thing?
In today's society, as you look around, it seems that there are people who don't really care about how they act in public or not.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Because the society we live in today, unfortunately, there are the norms have changed. So there are certain things that they won't do. Even in the context of this society, there are certain things that a person won't do in our society, right? So it's true that what was forbidden then today is allowed, but then there's other things that are forbidden, right? So there's certain things that you have to control yourself, right? So there's always going to be social norms and social conventions that you have to follow. It's just they change all the time. I do agree on that. Okay, so now that we understand the relationship between Ayin Hara and Yetzer Hara, let's look at the third thing, Besinat Haberiyot, people who have hatred towards others, right? People who have hatred towards others are the people, that is the product of Ayin Hara, and that is a product of Yetzer Hara, meaning when you're always jealous of the world around you, when you're always jealous of people around you, and you're always looking, why does he have that? It inevitably leads to Sinat Haberiyot. It inevitably leads to you being a hateful person. And by the way, one of the reasons that we see now in American society so much rift, so much social unrest, people against people, crazy things happening that 2-3 years ago we would not have thought even possible. Look at the anti-Semitism. It's never, you've never seen things like this in the streets of New York. Guys, this guy threw some explosive device in the Diamond District, other guys getting beat up, in public. So it's incredible, the amount of hatred. Asians getting beaten up in public, right? So what's happening in American society today, what is it about? It's about this Mishnah. It's exactly what the Mishnah says. The minute you start with Ayin Hara, the minute you start telling people, hey, he's rich, the rich don't pay their fair share of taxes. What is a fair share of taxes? They actually pay almost all the taxes in the United States. It's paid by the top 2-3%. They pay, I think, I mean, maybe I'm exaggerating, but I think maybe the top 10% pay like 90% of the taxes. What's their fair share of taxes? Yeah, the poor pay no taxes. So if you want to talk about fair share of taxes, that would they pay something, but they don't pay anything, and I'm okay with that. I think that's the right thing. By the way, I don't think poor people should pay taxes. I'm totally okay. But it's so funny how they use these ideas to cause rift between people. They want people to hate each other because by causing people to hate each other, they're going to get more votes. So you cause this social unrest. But where does it lead? It leads to a hateful society. So when you inculcate Ayin Hara into people, when you inculcate people and teach them, be jealous of him, be jealous of her. Why is he so successful? Why does he own that building? What does it lead to? Sinat Abot, right here, black on white. Amazing commentary on why our society has developed. But I don't think it's hopeless. Maybe things will change. It could be that it's a temporary. But I want to read to you what the. I'm just going to read to you a passage in Avot Binatan on this Mishnah, and it's like exactly the point. V'sinat beriyot kesa melamed shelo yechaven adam lomar ehov et hachachamim usno et hatalmidim. This comes to teach us that, for example, you shouldn't say, I love the hachamim, the people who teach Torah, but I'm against the talmidim, I'm against the people who study Torah. I love the students who study Torah, and then I hate the people who don't study Torah at all. You should love everybody equally. You should love everybody equally, right? And I see this as well in many political systems. Class warfare is the most hateful tool used by politicians to succeed, and it's also the most pathetic tool used by politicians to succeed, because ultimately they're destroying the country that they want to rule over. So, at the end, what do they have left? Nevertheless, this is what the Mishnah is talking about, and that's a statement that Rabbi Yoshua. I think it's a brilliant statement. I think it's a brilliant commentary, and well worth thinking about. But I want to think about, is there a cure for this? So what's the cure? So we have this Ayin Ra'ah, which is, again, a particular defect in the glasses we wear. We look at things with jealousy. Is there a cure to that? Yes, a person who has an evil inclination, he's not happy with what God said he can eat, he needs to eat something else. And hatred of the other. Hatred. Is there a cure to that? These things, they take you out of this world. And the answer is yes. Look at the next Mishnah.
It seems that the victims are often the ones they're jealous of, right? They kill the guy to steal his car.
Yeah.
It's not the guy who has the jealousy problem that falls victim, but it's the richer guy or the guy that has what he wants.
Right.
That's receiving how
no, what do you mean? No. Perhaps I'm misunderstanding you. Mosina ta'adam min ha'olam means the person with the evil eye, he's the one who loses the world.
right? But I'm saying in practicality, it ends up being the one that he's jealous of that suffers.
Maybe,
They're
well,
stealing his money, they're attacking him for what he has.
if they can do so, they can't always do so, right? I mean, sometimes they try, they're not always successful. Yeah, sometimes you have the French Revolution and then they sometimes they're successful, but it's talking about the person who does it. If a person is killed, we don't need the Chachamim to tell us, oh, he was just killed, right? He's out. But here it's talking about the person who does it. The person with this Ayin Ra'ah is the one who's losing this world. That's why, because when you have Ayin Ra'ah, you can never enjoy what you have. These people who break into stores and vandalize and get 10 pairs of Nike sneakers, they don't enjoy a single pair of their sneakers. They never do. They can't. God prevents it. The process in the brain that allows a person to feel good about something, they can't. God takes it away from them.
So what's the
Right.
now means that he dies or that he's just
He's taken
not
away,
enjoying
well,
the beauty
he
of the
literally,
world.
his life is shortened from this world. Now, there's two ways your life can be shortened in this world. One is chronologically. And the other is you don't taste anything. You lost, when people had coronavirus, they couldn't taste, right? So it's like you're eating this amazing food, but you just can't taste it. That's another way to get taken out of this world. So it's talking about the people, the aggressors. It's not talking about the victim. The victims, French Revolution worked really well for them, and other things like that, but not always. Many times the rich stay in power and everybody is obedient to them, right? Okay, so let's look at the next Mishnah.
So in Yiddish or in German, there's an expression, there are two types of people.
Yeah.
A beginner
Yeah,
and a mitzvah.
right,
A beginner wants to, if you're making a mitzvah celebration for your own son,
Yeah.
it's like he's making it for his own son.
Yeah.
He's quelling his appetite.
Right.
The beginner is jealous, envious. Why can he do that and I can't?
Right. Yes, that's very good.
Two types of people.
Okay. All right, let's read the next Mishnah. The Biose Omer, I'm going to go fast because we have a few minutes left. So let's get to the Biose. The Biose Omer, Yehi mamon haverach haviv alecha keshelach. He says something really shocking and it almost hurts the ears because we are Westerners. Thank you very much. It almost hurts the ears as a Westerner to hear this. But he says it nevertheless. He wasn't a Westerner and he wasn't raised in the United States of America or in England or even in France. The Biose Omer, Yehi mamon haverach haviv alecha keshelach. You should love your friend's property. You should love your friend's assets as you love your own property, as you love your own assets. Look at the word Haviv. What does Haviv mean? Like Havivi? Love, right. Meaning, if your friend succeeds, you should genuinely feel happiness for him. This will make you a healthier person. Meaning, if you have this problem, what is the antidote to Ayn Ra'ah? What is the antidote to viewing everything in an evil, gray way? To actively seek the welfare and the benefit of your friend's property. Think about what you can do to help your friend. If you, for example, let's say you have a friend who is in real estate and you've become aware of a particular opportunity. Why the heck should I tell him an opportunity? Why should I tell him? I'm not in real estate, but let's say I have a friend who's in real estate. I found that saying, I'm not going to tell him. What the heck? Next. Now, I'm an attorney. I would like somebody to tell me, by the way, there's a big legal case. They're looking for somebody just like you. Why should I tell him? Why the heck should I tell him? Now, he's not an attorney, but he won't tell me. Well, that's not the way people act, right? We all have our own particular interests. We have our day, we have our schedule, we have our agenda, and we're going to follow our agenda to the fullest. And that's where we all act, right? This is an amazing chidush. It says, okay, you spend time during the day, and you should spend time during the day thinking about your benefit and your welfare. You have an obligation to work hard. Okay, nobody's saying not to. But if you think of a way to help your friend, if you think of a way to make your friend more successful, that's amazing because you're curing yourself from any possibility of ayin ra'ah. The minute you do that opposite action, you just expel the ayin ra'ah from your system, right? So if given the opportunity to help your friend in his business, do it. If you can give your friend some good advice, give him advice. If you learn of something that can make your friend more successful, tell him this is what you should be doing. Why? Well, you're doing it for your friend, and you should do it because you love him and you want him to succeed. But at the end of the day, you will be benefiting yourself. If you view the world in dull colors and you're not getting the full flavor of life, think of what you can do to help somebody else. If you figure out a way to help somebody else in their business, your eyes will open up and you'll suddenly start seeing colors. That's the way God designed the world. So this first thing, Yamon Haverach, Haviv Alecha Keshelach, is the antidote for the first thing that Yoshua talks about, Ayin Hara. Let's go to the second thing. And if I have time at the end, I will take questions only because, quickly.
I know they do it a lot. Why is it Alecha Keshelach and not Keshelach?
It's right. It has no relevance in the meaning. It's just two ways to pronounce it. Yeah. And it happens a lot. Exactly. Ve'atken asmecha could have also been ve'atken asmach, right? That's another example. Right? Asmecha asmach. Ve'atken asmecha lilmod Torah she'ena yerusha lach. Okay, what was the second thing that Yoshua spoke about? The yeser hara, the evil instinct, the instinct that says, I must have the non-kosher food. I must have that forbidden, be with that forbidden person. I must do things in a devious or a deviant fashion. You can do it in the right fashion. Why do you have to be deviant? No. It's only what's not mine that's good, right? What's the cure for the yeser hara? The answer is hatken asmecha lilmod Torah. Prepare yourself so that you can properly study Torah. I want to explain this. The human psyche is very deep. It's like an ocean. And in this ocean is the individual. And an individual oftentimes feels lost in the sense that he doesn't quite understand what's meaningful in his life. And people are always looking to fill that void by finding meaning. And when we don't fill that void by finding meaning, then we have a need to go outside of ourselves. And a lot of this pathology that says, I must go out of myself, meaning what I have and what's rightfully mine is not enough. I must act in a deviant fashion. A lot of that deviant behavior, a lot of that desire to deviate is related to that void. Well, what can you do to fill the void? What can you do to find that meaning? And the answer is the most powerful tool, and it's not even a tool, the most powerful thing that a person can do is take Talmud Torah seriously. Start studying Torah in a serious fashion. Because when you study Torah seriously, you begin to develop a relationship with the author of the Torah. And you begin to enter into this dialogue with the author of the Torah. And that dialogue, it fills the void. And you get meaning in your life. And when you get meaning, the Yeser Hara from the previous Mishnah is annulled. Because the Yeser Hara can prey upon a person who feels that emptiness. So don't feel that emptiness. Study Torah seriously. Obviously, there's a little more I can say about that, but we have about a minute to go. So I do want to get to the last part, which is She'ena Yerushalach. And furthermore, it's telling a person, let's say your father was a great Hacham. So you say, I don't really have to study so much. My father taught me Torah, I know it, I get it. It's like an inheritance. Well, Torah is like an inheritance in a sense that, yeah, you could be privileged and your father could have taught you Torah as he did me. But you better study. You better take it seriously. Because if you don't, it's not yours. You'll lose it, right? Even if your father was the greatest Hacham, if you don't study Torah, if you don't take it seriously, you will lose it. Okay? She'ena Yerushalach, there's no free lunches. And finally, the third thing, V'chol ma'asecha yihiyu l'shem shamayim. Whatever you do in your life, think about, how am I improving the world that I'm in? What good am I bringing to the world, right? So if you're going to be doing something and you can't answer that question, for example, I work really hard. I do. I'm sure all of you work hard. Why are you doing that? Because you have families. You want to give your families a good life, right? That's a good thing. It's a very good thing. We don't think about it enough, but we should. When you think about that, you're like, it just becomes easier because you're like, yeah, I want to do this. I do want to work hard. I do want to try to give my family, good things and, make my wife and kids happy, right? Think about what good you're bringing into the world, right? Even if you exercise, what good are you doing when you exercise? Well, if you're just obsessed with your body and you just want to take pictures of yourself and put it on Facebook, that's like, chazit. That's all I can say. And I mean that seriously. I just say chazit about those people. I mean, it's just so pathetic. But if you're thinking, I want to be healthy, God gave me this, healthy existence. I want to maintain it, that's good. That's a good thing. You should be doing that. Because if you have a healthy body, you can actually produce more in the world. You can bring more good to the world. You can live a longer life and use your energy to improve things, to fix things, to do good things, right? So everything you do should be for ultimate purpose to bring good to the world. And that's the antidote to sinat beriot. When you hate the people around you, you're always thinking about what can I do to bring things down? What can I do to ruin things? What can I do to hurt? Right? That's a sickness, and it's very common. Very common. Antidote. So just to summarize this, we have the statement of Rabbi Yehoshua. Rabbi Yehoshua identifies a particular pathology, and it's a complex. These three things are connected. Ayin ra'ah, yeser hara, sinat beriot. And his colleague, Rabbi Yosef, he identifies the cure to that particular pathology, which is love your friend's business, assets, property. What can you do to help him? You have a yetzer hara, everybody has a yetzer hara. Fill the void by studying Torah. And finally, think about the noble purpose of what you're doing. All your actions should have a noble purpose. And if they do, you will be bringing love to the world instead of the hate that's being brought on the other side. So that's those, you see the relation between the two Mishnayot. I'm happy we were able to finish it. If you have any questions now,